What happens after a DUI arrest in Pennsylvania? Step by step. You were just arrested for a DUI in Pennsylvania. Your head is still spinning. The paperwork in your hands reads like another language. And you're trying to figure out what just happened, what comes next, and how bad this is actually going to get. Here's what I want you to know right now. A DUI arrest is not a conviction. The path forward is more navigable than it feels at 2 a.m. staring at a stack of paperwork on your table. I'm Sean Quinlan, Pennsylvania DUI attorney based in Camp Hill. This is the full step-by-step breakdown of what happens after a DUI arrest in Pennsylvania and what you need to do at each stage to protect yourself. The most important thing to understand first. Before we go step by step, there's one thing you need to understand that most people miss entirely, and it causes a lot of unnecessary damage. A Pennsylvania DUI case almost immediately splits into two separate tracks. Track 1 is the criminal case, the charge, the court dates, the potential conviction or resolution. Track 2 is the license side. What happens to your driving privileges through PennDOT, Pennsylvania's Department of Transportation? These two tracks run alongside each other. They don't always move at the same pace, and one doesn't automatically wait for the other. You can be making progress in court while a PennDOT suspension is already running. A good court result doesn't automatically fix every license consequence. Once you understand that these are two separate problems that need separate attention, the whole process starts to feel less like chaos and more like a checklist. Before you do anything else, right now, today, do three things before anything else. First, get organized. Put every document in one folder. Your complaint, your summons, your bail papers, your property receipt, court date notices, and any temporary driving paperwork that you received after the release. Scrambling for papers the night before court is a problem you can easily avoid. Second, read the charging document carefully. The exact subsection matters in DUI cases. Pennsylvania has different penalty levels depending on your BAC, whether drugs were involved, whether you refused testing, and your prior history. DUI is not just one charge. It's a category with very different outcomes inside it. Third, write down a timeline of what happened while the details are still fresh. Where were you? What the officer said, whether he did the field sobriety tests, whether chemical testing was allowed, what happened at the station, how long you waited before a blood draw. Small details can matter significantly, and later, they fade fast. What happened on arrest day? Let's walk through what happened the day you were arrested, because understanding the sequence helps you understand what comes next. After the traffic stop, you were taken in for processing, booking, fingerprinting, photographs, property inventory. In most DUI cases in Pennsylvania, you're not held for an extended jail stay. You're processed and released, sometimes with bail conditions attached. Chemical testing is a major part of this stage. That's either a breath test or a blood draw, and it is critical. An alleged refusal. In Pennsylvania, refusing a breath or blood test creates separate license problems under the implied consent law. The implied consent law basically says that by driving in Pennsylvania, you've already agreed to chemical testing if lawfully requested. Refusing doesn't just affect your criminal case, it can trigger a PennDOT license suspension independently before the criminal case is anywhere close to finished. So if you refuse testing, treat the license issue as urgent from day one. Don't assume you can deal with it later in court. It doesn't work that way. Whether you left after processing, you should have received paperwork showing your next court date and any conditions of your release. Those conditions might include travel restrictions, no alcohol requirements, or check-in requirements. Follow every single one of them exactly. Understanding which DUI tier you're facing. Once you have your paperwork, the next step is understanding which DUI tier you're actually facing, because that determines almost everything about how serious your case is. Pennsylvania uses three main tiers for alcohol-related DUI. General impairment, BAC of 0.08 to 0.10 is the lowest tier. High rate, BAC of 0.10 up to 0.16. Highest rate, 0.16 and above. A small jump in BAC can change the pressure level of a case dramatically. The line between one tier and another isn't a technicality. It can change the fines, the jail exposure, and the license consequences, and the treatment requirements. Drug DUI is its own category and often gets treated like the highest tier. That includes marijuana, illegal drugs, and prescription medication. And a valid prescription is not a free pass. If the Commonwealth alleges the medication made you unsafe to drive, the charge can still move forward. Prior offenses matter enormously. A first offense often opens up the door to better outcomes, including possible ARD eligibility. A second or third offense brings mandatory minimum penalties that significantly limit the options available to you. The criminal court process step by step. Here's what the court side of your case typically looks like. Preliminary hearing. This is usually your first formal court appearance. You're told the charges, bail is addressed, and any release conditions are set. It's often quick, but the conditions set here matter. Follow them. Preliminary hearing. This happens before a magisterial district judge, not a full trial. The prosecution has to show there's enough evidence for the case to move forward. In central Pennsylvania, this typically happens within a few weeks of arrest. If the case is held for court at this stage, it moves up to the Court of Common Pleas. Formal arraignment and pretrial phase. After the case moves up, you enter the phase where the real work happens. Evidence review, police reports, body cam footage, breath machine calibration records, blood draw documentation. This is where defense issues get identified and motions can be filed. Resolution. ARD, plea, or trial. Most DUI cases don't go to trial. Many first offense cases aim toward ARD. Others resolve through a negotiated plea. Trial is the longest path, but sometimes the right one depending on the facts. At every court date, bring your paperwork, bring your ID, arrive early, dress neatly, follow your bail conditions, and confirm the next date before you leave. A missed court date can trigger a bench warrant, and that turns a manageable problem into a much uglier one. Protecting your license as early as possible. For most people in central Pennsylvania, the license issue hits harder than the criminal charge in the short term. Work, childcare, medical appointments, and daily life don't stop because your case started. Check your license status through PennDOT and watch every deadline on your paperwork. Don't assume your license is fine just because the physical card is still in your wallet. License suspension can be triggered by refusal, by conviction, or by prior history, depending on your facts. And as I mentioned earlier, refusal cases can bring automatic PennDOT consequences that move on their own timeline completely separate from your court case. Depending on your situation, you may qualify for restrictive driving options, an occupational limited license or ignition interlock that can help you keep driving during the process. Those options have their own requirements and deadlines, so don't wait to look into them. If you hold a CDL, get ahead of this immediately. Commercial driving rules can be triggered by using a single DUI even if the arrest was in your personal vehicle. Your ability to earn a living can be affected before the criminal case is resolved. Same goes for licensed professionals, nurses, teachers, healthcare workers, government employees. Know your reporting obligations now, not after your employer or licensing board finds out on their own. ARD, the first offense question that matters most. If this is your first DUI in Pennsylvania, ARD is likely the most important part of this entire conversation. ARD, Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition, is a pretrial diversion program that can allow you to resolve a first offense case without a standard conviction. If you qualify and complete the program successfully, successful completion can also lead to expungement, meaning the arrest and court record can be cleared. That's a dramatically different result from a guilty plea that stays on your record permanently. But ARD is not automatic. Eligibility can be blocked by prior record issues, an accident with injuries, a minor passenger in the vehicle, and county-specific policies that vary more than most people expect. What happens in Cumberland County may not play out identically in Dauphin County, for example. ARD still comes with requirements: classes, treatment, fees, supervision, community service in some cases, and, depending on your BAC tier, possible license consequences. It's not a free pass, but it's often the difference between a rough year and a lasting criminal record. Watch the deadlines. ARD applications, evaluation requirements, and program paperwork all have timing components. Missing them can cost you the opportunity entirely. Building your defense, where cases get weaker. Here's something a lot of people forget in the fog of the arrest. A DUI charge is not a conviction. Cases have weak spots, and they're worth looking for. The traffic stop itself, for example. An officer needs a valid legal reason to pull you over and sufficient facts to extend the investigation from there. If that foundation is shaky, Later evidence may be vulnerable as a result. Field sobriety testing. Roadside balance and coordination tests are not objective measurements. Weather, lighting, pavement, footwear, medical conditions, fatigue, and nerves can all affect performance, and they're supposed to be accounted for. A lawyer looks at how those tests were explained, administered, and scored. Chemical testing and chain of custody. Breath and blood testing both come with rules, timing requirements, machine calibration, storage and handling standards, documentation. In blood cases especially, problems with the chain of custody, the paper trail showing who handled the sample and when, can matter significantly. The result number isn't the whole story. The process that produced it has to hold up to. This is why it's important to write down your timeline early. Your own account of what happened from the stop forward is part of how these issues get identified. Possible outcomes and what comes after court. Most DUI cases in Pennsylvania resolve a few ways. Dismissal. When evidence problems or procedural issues are significant enough to undermine the prosecution's case. Reduction or negotiated plea. A charge reduction, better sentencing terms, or a plea to a lesser offense based on the evidence problems or negotiation. ARD. For eligible first-time offenders, the pretrial diversion path that avoids a conviction. Finally, trial. When the case needs to be fought directly. Longer, more uncertain, but sometimes the right call. If there's a conviction, sentencing can include fines, jail, probation, treatment, alcohol highway safety school, and license consequences. Mandatory minimums set the floor at each tier, and repeat offenses can raise that floor significantly. And remember, case over doesn't always mean everything is over. Sentencing terms, license requirements, treatment programs, and probation can all continue after the courtroom piece is finished. Expungement after ARD requires an additional step and doesn't happen automatically. A DUI arrest in Pennsylvania is serious, but it's a process, not a verdict. Once you understand the two-track system, know which tier you're facing, protect your license early, and get ahead of the ARD question if it applies to you, the path forward becomes a lot clearer. Start today with one thing. Put every court date, every PennDOT deadline, and every license-related date on the calendar before the paperwork starts piling up. That single step protects you from the most common mistake people make after a Pennsylvania DUI arrest, letting something critical slip while you're still trying to catch your breath. If you've been charged with a DUI in Pennsylvania and want to understand exactly where your case stands, reach out. Free consultation, no pressure, link is in the description. Subscribe for more straight talk on Pennsylvania DUI law. See you in the next video.